There is a line that circulates in the world of modern sport, without anyone quite knowing who said it first. I don't play for the trophy, I play for the story. It sounds like something an athlete would say after winning, or after losing. It sounds modern. It sounds like our century, the century of narrative, of legacy, of what remains after the scoreboard resets. But the line is older than sport. Or rather, sport has never really been about the trophy. It has been about something else. Every civilization that invented competition gave it a purpose larger than victory. A ritual, a war, a prayer, a judgment. Risto here. History buff, not historian. English isn't my first language. That's kind of the point. Learn a little, laugh a little, that's the deal. Human nature doesn't change, and neither does the plot. History rhymes and keeps the receipts. I mean, somebody always writes it down. Today, 4 stories from 4 continents. Each one looks like a sport. None of them is what you think. The oldest ball game in human history was played on courts made of stone. Not fields of grass, carved masonry, sloped walls, sunken alleys. The oldest known ball courts date to about 1650 before the Common Era, in the tropical lowlands along the Gulf Coast of Mexico. The Olmec played it first, the Maya inherited it, the Aztecs took it further. When the Spanish arrived, it was still being played across half a continent. Across centuries, the essentials remained the same. A heavy rubber ball, 2 teams, and a stone court shaped like a capital I. The players struck the ball with their hips, sometimes with their forearms, rarely with their feet, and in the later centuries, sometimes through a vertical stone ring set high in the wall on either side. The Mesoamericans had learned to chemically process rubber millennia before Goodyear patented industrial vulcanization. Injuries were severe. A ball of that weight traveling at speed could easily be lethal, despite heavy padded belts, thick leather hip guards, and sometimes helmets. And then, sometimes, not always, not everywhere, but sometimes, the game ended in ritual sacrifice. The frescoes at Chichen Itza, the great ball court in the Yucatán, show a decapitated ball player, kneeling, with streams of blood transforming into serpents as they leave his neck. It is one of the most famous images in Mesoamerican art. Everyone who visits the site sees it. Everyone recognizes the sacrifice. Yet the real mystery is who was being sacrificed. The intuitive answer is the losers. Losers are punished, winners survive. That is how we understand competition. But the intuitive answer may be wrong. Some historians believe the winners were sacrificed as the highest honor, sent at the moment of victory to accompany the sun on its journey through the underworld. Others argue that defeated captives from enemy cities were forced to play, and the losers were executed. After all these centuries, archaeology cannot decide between them. Archaeology reaches its limits here. The people who played the game took the answer with them. The Spanish arrived in the 16th century and banned it on religious grounds. They condemned it as pagan. The ball courts fell silent. Today, in some parts of Mexico, a modern version is being revived. The rules are reconstructed. The ball still weighs 3 kilograms, but nobody is sacrificed. The second story takes us to Japan and to a ceremony that is still practiced today before crowds of tens of thousands broadcast live on national television. You have probably seen it. 2 enormous men, wearing nothing but a ceremonial belt, face each other across a ring of packed clay. Before they fight, they throw handfuls of salt into the ring. They stomp, they squat, they crouch, they rise, they squat again. The whole preparation takes several minutes. The fight itself lasts on average 6 seconds. Sumo is often described as Japan's national sport, but its deepest roots are not athletic. They are ritual. Sumo has been a Shinto agricultural rite for at least 1,300 years, and possibly longer. The earliest written reference describes a wrestling match between two divine beings to determine the ownership of the Japanese islands. Sumo predates Japan as a political entity. It was practiced at Shinto shrines to entertain the spirits and to divine, from the outcome of the bouts, whether the coming harvest would be abundant or poor. People's lives depended on the reading. If the wrestlers gave a good performance, the spirits were satisfied and the rice would grow. If the performance was weak, they were displeased and famine might follow. Every gesture still has a ritual meaning. The salt purifies the ring. The stamping drives away evil spirits. Before every tournament, the dohyo, the clay ring, is consecrated in a religious ceremony, with priests burying offerings at its center and pouring sake over the straw boundary. Without that ceremony, no sumo is possible. The referee wears robes based on the imperial court dress of 1,000 years ago. His black cap is copied from the caps worn by Shinto priests. He is not officiating a sport. He is officiating a rite. The wrestlers, unknowingly, are still answering the same question with every contest. Will the harvest be good? That no one asks anymore. The rice comes from supermarkets now. The ritual survives, the meaning has faded, but the ritual continues exactly as it always has. This creates strange collisions between the ancient rite and the modern world. Not long ago, the mayor of a Japanese city collapsed of a heart attack while giving a speech on a dohyo during a sumo demonstration. A female nurse in the audience ran up onto the ring to perform emergency resuscitation. The organizers, over the loudspeakers, immediately ordered her to leave. Because women are not permitted on the dohyo. Not politicians, not doctors, not medics in emergencies. Never. It is a Shinto purity rule. Blood is considered polluting to a sacred space. The rule has been in place for 1,000 years. It is applied without exception, even when the exception is a dying man on the clay. She was ordered off. He survived, thanks to bystanders who ran up moments later. The ring was later ritually purified. You can call this many things: barbaric, sacred, absurd, beautiful. To see only a sport is to overlook centuries of ritual. We move to England, to the 14th century, and to the strangest sport law in European history. By 1363, England had been at war with France for a generation, the war we now call the 100 Years' War. The great victories of the English longbowmen, Crécy, Poitiers, had been won by peasants with bows. Volleys of arrows had shredded the flower of French chivalry. Armoured knights were killed at a distance by men who could not read. But by 1363, King Edward III was worried. He complained that young men preferred football, handball, and cockfighting to archery. He banned the games and ordered every able-bodied man to practice with the longbow, on holidays and on Sundays, under penalty of imprisonment. Football was, in that year, illegal in England, because it interfered with military training. Later monarchs repeatedly renewed these laws. Every village had its butts, large banks of earth built to stop the arrows. You can still find place names in England today: Newington Butts, Butt Lane, The Butts, marking the places where medieval villagers gathered every Sunday after Mass to practice with the longbow. It was, in effect, a state-enforced Sunday training program that kept England's army ready for war. Boys began at the age of 7 with a small bow and a few blunted arrows. By 17, they were expected to own a full-length war bow and 4 arrows, and to be able to hit a target at long range. What this did to their bodies, we know from the Mary Rose. What years of compulsory practice did to their bodies, we know from the Mary Rose. The Mary Rose was Henry VIII's flagship. It sank during a battle against a French invasion fleet and was raised from the seabed centuries later, with much of its crew still inside. More than 100 longbows were found beside the skeletons of the archers. The archers are recognizable at a glance. Their shoulders, spines, and fingers all bear the marks of a lifetime spent drawing a powerful war bow. They had trained since childhood, and that training had permanently reshaped their bodies. Even 500 years later, you can still look at the bones and say, "This was an English archer." That is what the Sunday sport really was. Today, English archery is a peaceful hobby. Small children learn it in summer camps. Retired accountants shoot at the local club on Saturday mornings. It is the sport of amateurs and enthusiasts, entirely detached from war. That was not what it was in 1363. What it was in 1363 was the state's response to what happens when men have too much free time and there is a war to fight.
The fourth and last story is the strangest. It comes from an island isolated in the South Pacific, Rapa Nui, which most of the world knows as Easter Island. You know the famous statues, the moai, the great stone figures, some over 10 meters tall, that stand along the coast facing inland. There are hundreds of them. They were carved between about 1250 and 1500 of the Common Era, and they are the reason most people visit the island. What most visitors do not know is that around the 16th century, the Rapa Nui stopped carving them. The reasons are still debated: deforestation, drought, contact with rats, social change, the failure of a religious system. Probably some combination of all of these. What is clear is that at some point, the immense collective effort that had built the moai for centuries came to an end. And in place of the old cult of the statues, a new practice emerged: the cult of the Birdman. Every year in the southern spring, when the seabirds came to nest on a small rocky islet off the southwestern tip of the island, the chiefs of the clans gathered at a ceremonial village called Orongo. Orongo sits on the rim of a dormant volcano, high above the sea, on the edge of a sheer cliff. Each chief chose a champion to compete for him. The champion descended the cliff. He swam through shark-infested waters, according to oral tradition, across to the islet. And he waited. For days. For weeks. Sometimes for over a month. In a cave, on that rock, along with the young men of the other clans, waiting for the birds to arrive and to lay their first eggs. The first man to find an egg, protect it from breakage, tie it to his forehead with a woven headband, swim back to the main island, climb back up the cliff, and present it to his chief, the first to complete that journey won the year. But not for himself. He won the year for his chief. His chief became the Birdman for 1 year. He was considered sacred, untouchable. He was secluded in a special hut. His hair and nails could not be cut. He received tribute from all the clans. He held religious authority over the whole island. The champion who had risked his life, who had climbed and swum and waited, went back to his ordinary life. He received a share of the honour, some prestige, some material rewards, but he was not the birdman. He was the man who had brought the egg. More than 100 petroglyphs are carved into the rocks around Orongo, showing the birdman figure, half man, half frigate bird, holding an egg. Each carving is believed to represent a winner of the competition. Every winner recorded in stone. Every chief who ruled for a year. Every proxy race. Every young man who nearly drowned. Every egg that made it across. The competition seems to have run for about a century and a half. Anthropologists, beginning with the Englishwoman Catherine Routledge, who arrived on Rapa Nui in 1914 and collected oral histories from the last surviving elders, recorded the names of 86 winners. The last one is generally believed to have won in 1866 or 1867. That same year, the first Catholic missionaries witnessed the final ceremony. They watched the winning egg being carried through the village. They watched the ritual dance. They pronounced it demonic, and they banned it. The rite that had defined an island for 150 years, that had transferred power from chief to chief across generations, that had generated 100 stone carvings on a volcanic ridge, ended. Not because it had failed, not because the population had lost faith. It ended because two men in cassocks decided that it should. Around the same time, Peruvian slave raiders arrived on the island and took approximately half of the surviving population, including most of the religious specialists who knew how the rite worked. Those who came back brought smallpox and tuberculosis. Within a decade, the population of Rapa Nui had collapsed. The knowledge of what the rite had really meant, what the egg symbolized, what the chief was supposed to do during his sacred year, how the ritual dance was performed. Most of it died with the priests, who were dragged onto Peruvian ships. The carvings are still there at Orongo. You can visit them. You can photograph them. The stones refuse to answer. Every civilization competes. Every civilization says that the competition is about winning. Every civilization, if you look closely enough, is doing something else. The harvest, the war, the gods, the lineage, the proof that the world is still turning as it should. Modern sport says the same thing in its own way. The Olympic Games have always carried geopolitical significance. The World Cup has become one of the world's great rituals of national identity. Professional football is also an immense economic enterprise.
The trophy matters, of course it does, but it has almost never been the point. The score, in the end, is never really the score. The competition is never really the competition. It has always been about something else. You are still watching. You are still counting. You are still cheering when your side wins. But the harvest, the war, the god, the lineage, they are still there, underneath. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing wherever you listen and sharing the episode with someone who might enjoy it. Until next time.